You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to speak to America's hardworking farmers and food producers. We should know. FLM Harvest is a strategic, full-service creative consultancy proud to reach more farmers, farmer boards, and food and commodity associations than any agency in the country. And we understand omni-channel as well as we understand the journey from field to fork. Most importantly, we connect clients to the audiences that matter to them.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Meet the Lawmaker, joined today by Representative Pete Stauber of Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. Thanks for joining me today, Congressman. First of all, if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Ben, and it's a privilege to be with you today. So a little bit about myself. I'm married. I'm a father of 4. I had an earlier in my life a professional hockey career, and then 23 years in law enforcement. 8 years on the city council, 6 years on the board of commissioners, and I'm a freshman lawmaker here in Washington, D.C. With the 8th Congressional District in Minnesota as their representative.
We're about to wrap up the first year, your first year here in Congress. Just tell me first of all, tell me what your thoughts of Congress have been so far just in the last year.
So I can say this, Ben, that it's been a privilege and a blessing to be able to represent Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. Every opportunity that I get to make sure that we represent Minnesota's 8th Congressional District as best we can, the state of Minnesota, and of course this great nation. So for me, Ben, it's been just a privilege, and I have the opportunity, even in the minority, to talk about and push things that support our district, including our farmers.
As far as Minnesota's 8th District, it's mostly that northeast part of Minnesota. Can you describe some of the agriculture in that district? And I'm assuming it's going to be a little bit different than the southern portion of the state where there's more corn and soybeans, but what's the ag makeup there like?
Well, the southwestern part of the district is ranchers and farmers, and we have some soybeans. We have some sugar beets in the northwest, and I think that's important that we as representatives, we make sure that our farmers are represented, and they are. And I know that the USMCA is going to be passed hopefully soon. I hope that the Speaker puts it on the floor because not only our farmers, but our farmers, ranchers, miners, small businessmen and women, they've been waiting for that make sure that they have the opportunity to succeed. And I think it's going to pass in a very, very bipartisan fashion.
As far as USMCA, tell me how it will benefit folks in your district in the ag sector, and then also just outside ag as well.
Well, in the ag sector, we know that it's going to create on the very outset at least 176,000 jobs, and many of those are going to come to Minnesota's 8th District in our farming community. And we also know that at the start, once it's passed, it has a potential, the very first year, to bring our GDP up 0.5% just on that trade deal alone. And I think that's not only great for our farmers and ranchers, but it's great for this country.
Some other legislation you've worked on just this past year with the gray wolf and then waters of the U.S. Can you tell me about some of the ag priorities and I guess rural priorities you have here in Congress?
Well, look at the gray wolf. I mean, myself and in a bipartisan way, working with Colin Peterson, we're looking to delist the gray wolf off the Endangered Species Act. You know, that wolf was never meant to be put on there permanently, and we know that the gray wolf has come back. President Obama and his administration even agreed with that we can delist the gray wolf. But unfortunately, there was a judge in Washington, D.C. here, Ben, that decided now that she knows better, or they know better than Minnesota. And then I think that both Colin Peterson and I understand that by delisting the gray wolf, it will be good for our farmers and ranchers, and allow the Minnesota DNR to actually manage that gray wolf population. I'm hearing from farmers and ranchers, their cattle have been attacked and killed by the gray wolf. We have domestic pets being killed by the gray wolf, and of course our big game herd back in Minnesota. I think it's important that we recognize we can manage the DNR. I trust the Minnesota DNR to manage that, and working with ranchers and farmers, because it's critically important.
On the gray wolf, do you think having House Ag Chair Colin Peterson on this helps push this that could help push this legislation across the finish line to get something in the Senate and then signed by the president?
I do. I think that Colin and I have talked about this together. This is a bipartisan bill to make sure that we can delist the gray wolf. And if you look at Midwestern states and their senators and members of Congress, you look in Wisconsin, they're supportive of it. The state of Michigan is supportive of it. And I think it's important that we bring this over the finish line.
You're on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Small Business Committee. Were these two committees you wanted to be on? What's kind of the story there as far as
well, Ben, they fit the district. Transportation Infrastructure fits the district. In Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, we have every mode of transportation there is. And we have shipping and aircraft and of course trucks and rail. Those are that transports our commodities across the nation and throughout the world. And I think it's important that I'm representing Minnesota's 8th on the T&I committee. It's extremely important. We're going to look at, Ben, in rural Minnesota that affects our farming communities is deployment of broadband. That's not a necessity anymore, or not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity for us to have. We need to have our farmers being competitive, our rural schools being competitive, our rural hospitals being competitive in order to stay open and viable. And rural America needs that. And on the T&I committee, Ben, that's what we're pushing for, to make sure that not only rural Minnesota, but rural America is connected.
Are you pushing for any rural broadband legislation currently, or working on anything?
There's several bills that we're on, and it's still one of the things that we're working on right now is to make sure that when we talk about rural broadband, that we're investing in the areas of rural Minnesota and rural America that actually need it. And right now we want to make sure that the mapping is accurate and complete. And by working with some of the larger carriers, with the local carriers, we can spot those areas that are not or don't have the connectivity, and that's where we want to invest. We want everybody to have the opportunity in rural Minnesota to be connected to a high-speed, reliable broadband. It's important for so many reasons that I just mentioned, including small businesses that want to relocate from maybe some metro areas and live our quality of life.
Looking at your district, it was held by a Democrat since from 2013 to 2018. Do you feel yourself, when you have to, I guess, talk to some of these voters out there, do you feel like you have to sometimes moderate to the middle when they bring up some certain concerns on the, I guess, left side here in Congress or things like that?
Well, I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. There's only 48 members in Congress that are part of that. And what we want to do is we want to legislate in between the guardrails. There's a left ditch and a right ditch. That gets the media headlines, right? But I think this is where America is, in between the guardrails. And my legislation, every piece of legislation I've put forward and that has passed the House has been co-sponsored by a Democrat. I think that's critically important, that we work in a way that's bipartisan, that puts America and our citizens first, not one political party.
Do you think that gets lost nowadays with the media hype around impeachment and some of these other topics?
Well, there's no doubt that impeachment has sucked the life out of this nation's capital in order for us to, there's so much focus on it, Ben. We can do better than that. We're looking at the USMCA that has been on the Speaker's desk for over a year. We're looking at broadband deployment that we just talked about, the infrastructure. Infrastructure package that is more than just a continuing resolution. We can do more. We can secure our borders, make sure our military has the technology and the resources that they need to succeed in any mission that we give them. Those are priorities that I think really are non and bipartisan. I think that we can focus on those things that matter to America, that affect our pocketbooks, lower prescription drug prices throughout the nation, rather than focusing on this, as my colleague Colin Peterson, it's a hopelessly partisan attack on our president.
Kind of switching gears here to your time before Congress, you served several years in law enforcement. As a police officer, there were 2 times you were a victim of violent gun crimes. After that, How has that kind of changed your outlook on life and how you see where you are today, or just anything else?
Yeah, so Ben, I was a victim of 2 violent gun crimes, one while I was off duty and one while I was on duty, and I'm still a supporter of our Second Amendment. I believe that individual law-abiding citizens have the right to keep and bear arms. The 2 people that tried to take my life were career criminals, and they need to be prosecuted. And in one case, the individual that shot at me and I survived was a career criminal, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis wouldn't charge that individual with a felon in possession of a firearm. To me, that was unconscionable, and I was an off-duty cop at the time. I am adamant that if you commit a crime with a firearm, you will pay the price. But the law-abiding citizen, it's important that we protect that Second Amendment, and nobody wants a career criminal or a drug dealer or somebody that is going through a mental health crisis to have or possess a firearm. I mean, that's equal across the board.
Switching gears, I see behind you a hockey stick, and I've read a little bit about your college career in hockey. How did that get started, your interest in that?
So when you're born and raised in Minnesota, hockey is part of that opportunity early on, and I certainly took part of that. My family did. We had my 5 brothers and I all played hockey at one time, and being shuffled around the rinks, and there's 3 of us that played professionally. And I think that for the game of hockey, what I learned in hockey, I take every day into my job in Congress. You're focused, in the game of hockey, you're focused on winning. In Congress, you're focused on getting that legislation that moves, in my case, moves Minnesota 8 forward. Just focus on doing what's right, and when you focus on doing what's right and push that agenda, you can have successes.
Do you think that has helped you give yourself, I guess, a backbone when you get pushback from some of these folks?
Well, I think that's part of it. There's no doubt about it. When in the game of hockey, I mean, you have to train off ice, you have to do the right thing. I've always said, and as a coach, I coached for several years in my hometown of Hermantown, that student athlete that stays up late at night and studies for the exam or gets up early in the morning, that is the same student athlete that I can count on the hockey rink to do their job when needed. So it all follows, it's relative, and I think that the game of hockey, I love the game of hockey. I've talked to people in our office here that we can talk legislative items all you want, but if you want to talk the game of hockey, I'm all ears, I'm all open all the time. I love the sport.
You got a Caps game yet here?
Not yet, but I've been to the Wild games, and I think that, I was to the St. Louis Blues celebration, their Stanley Cup celebration, when President Trump held that for them at the White House, and just being around those professional athletes and what they've given back to the community of St. Louis is tremendous. And I think I'm the liaison to the congressional liaison to the National Hockey League, and for me it is about making sure that game is represented and people understand the good that game brings back to their respective communities.
This kind of leads into my next question. Congress can get very busy at times. What do you like to do, I guess, besides hockey in your free time, or maybe you play more hockey in your free time too, but what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I'm a husband, and I said I'm a father of 4, and I think that making sure that my wife and I are doing the best for our children, making sure that I still am a big part of our community, being part of the celebrations back home, and just leading by example. I will always try to do my part. Ben, I know when to lead, I know when to follow, and I know when to get out of the way. And I think that's important.
Last question here. If you could describe this year in one word, what would it be?
Awesome.
Anything else you'd like to add today?
No, it's just it's a blessing to be here and serve the great citizens back home, and in this case, our farmers and ranchers are a priority, and I'm proud that this administration has supported this USMCA, because I know, Ben, that our farmers can compete with anybody in the world on a level and fair playing field.
Congressman, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome.